Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session as part of Techtonic 2.0 on the next wave of AI technologies. So we've got a fantastic panel today that are going to give us a glimpse into the future and give us their perspectives on what we can expect from AI in the next 5 to 10 years, both in terms of research, but also business adoption. So I'll introduce the panelists in a few moments, but first of all, let me just say a few words to kind of set the scene. I always think that Australia has a pretty amazing capability in artificial intelligence. There are various global rankings where we do very well. So if you look at the Stanford's Global AI Vibrancy Index, for example, Australia ranks 8th in the world for AI. The Nature Index ranks as about 10th, and in particular in that index, there's 3 Australian universities that are ranked in the top 100 globally. And there's also a recent ranking that came out that uses a broader composite AI index based on Oxford Insights that ranks Australia about 11th in the world. So pretty strong overall, I would say. However, we are a small country, and so arguably to compete on the world stage, we need to do things differently than other countries in the world. We don't necessarily have the same levels of investment as some other countries do. We don't have the same number of big tech companies that other countries do, nor do we have the sheer numbers of trained AI engineers and scientists that other countries may have. But what we lack there, I think, we gain in potential, and with that amazing strength, particularly in the university sector, I think if we can bring all of that together, we can compete in certain areas on the world stage. And that's really what we're going to discuss today. We're going to be looking at what the next wave of AI technologies are, and in particular, where Australia can take a leading role. It's worth reflecting that, AI actually has quite a long history. AI was invented in the 1950s, so it's not a new technology. We've actually gone through 2 so-called AI winters during that time where the reality failed to live up to the hype and investment stopped. Hopefully we won't see a third, but we'll get into the details of what we can expect to hear from AI in the next 5 to 10 years. So just to introduce our panelists who are, I think, bring a varied range of perspectives on these questions. So first of all, we've got Anton van den Hengel. So he is a director of applied science at Amazon. He's also director of the Center for Augmented Reasoning at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning. He's a professor of computer science at the University of Adelaide, and he was also a fellow of the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering. And in fact, Anton was the founder of AIML, that's the Australian Institute for Machine Learning, which is Australia's largest machine learning research group and has ranked as high as number 2 in the world for computer vision research. So welcome, Anton. We've also got Liesl Yearsley here with us today. So she is the CEO of Akin, which is a deep tech AI company building AI for the habitat. And prior to that role, Liesl was CEO of Cognia, which is an AI company that became a global leader and was acquired by IBM Watson. At the time of its acquisition, Cognia had a number of Fortune 100 companies as clients and over 20,000 developers using the platform. So great to have you here today, Liesl. And then finally, our third panelist is Belinda Dennett, who is Corporate Affairs Director at Microsoft Australia. She's worked for Microsoft Australia's Corporate Affairs team since 2012, working across the intersection of technology, policy, geopolitics, and society. And she currently leads the AI policy development locally. Prior to joining Microsoft, she spent 5 years working as a senior policy advisor to the federal government in the communications, technology, and digital economy portfolio. So I think you'll agree that that's an absolutely fantastic lineup of panelists that I'm sure are going to answer all of our questions today. Just a reminder that you can enter questions for the panel at any time. There should be a Q&A window in the browser that you're using for the stream. So do please enter questions into there, and then we will pick those questions up as we go and towards the end of the discussion. So the first question that I really want to ask the panel, and we'll kind of go around one by one and give each a chance to answer this question, is a very simple question. And that is, what can we expect to see from AI in the next 5 to 10 years? How is it going to transform industry in particular? So I might start with you, Liesl, to give us your perspective on that question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think we're going to see 3 mega trends within the next 5 years. The one is that, sorry, I've just got my husband in another room and he's actually talking quite loudly, so forgive the background noise here. The one is that AI are going to become much bigger decision makers in everyday life. In America, over 64% of households now have Amazon Prime, and Amazon's really an AI company. Google, Facebook, most of the giant companies are really thinking about AI more and more. So we're going to have AI that are in our homes, in our lives, the grandchildren of your Amazon Alexa and Google Home Hub and your Microsoft Suite are going to become much more sophisticated, much more able to predict and anticipate what you want and need. And I believe, I've no doubt, that we will be handing more than half of our household decisions or our day-to-day decisions over to an AI. And we'll be having about a third of our relationship time with that. If you don't believe me, think about something like, say, Google Maps, or, if you're writing an email and auto completes for you, or if you use an air conditioner, or if you drive a car that has adaptive braking systems. These are all actually AI technologies that just kind of, enter in our lives in a gentle background way and end up becoming more and more part of what we do. I think in that world, we're going to see a very different relationship between customers and brands. In 5 years from now, I'm going to care less about, I won't care about if my organic broccoli comes from this supermarket or that supermarket, or my mortgage comes from this bank or that bank, because I'm going to have a personal AI that's increasingly understanding me, making those decisions for me, and taking all of the cognitive cycles out of interacting with brands. We really don't want to interact with brands. We want to live our lives. We want to have organic broccoli or non-organic broccoli, or not broccoli at all, or go on a holiday, or save money, or, be with people we love. So I think that's a big trend that we don't realize how significant and impactful it's going to be. The second big one, I think, is that AI is going to become a lot more immersive and in some overt ways, but in some ubiquitous ways. So I often think about the progression of technology as kind of a pipe, like a fat pipe. Like the first time human beings leapt onto the back of a horse, we're effectively using something stronger than ourselves to actually amplify our ability to get around the world and to get information from the world. And then you look at something like the printing press, we're essentially amplifying again our ability to exchange information with our world, how we put our words out there and consume data. And every age of computing has brought a progression. So think for a minute about these things. We didn't have them 20 years ago. They're a fat pipe of information where we make our feelings and wishes and thoughts and intents known to the outside world, and it comes back to us. If you take this away, it's like a piece of your hand is missing. So it's a tool that's become part of who we are. And AI is going to become much more immersive, ubiquitous. We'll have AI glasses. We'll have AI that are predictive and anticipatory, and stuff in our environment that's adapting as we walk through it. And we will be thinking less and less about it, but relying on it more and more. And then a third mega trend that's coming, if you're interested in the winters that John mentioned, there's also been, DARPA talks about 3 waves of AI. Our first wave was very structured. We were looking at symbolic reasoning, teaching computers the relationship between objects. These systems can reason. They're expert systems or rules-based systems. They can reason, but they don't learn very well. Then we had the era of machine learning, which is our second wave, based on biological theories and paradigms. And these systems, you can throw enormous amounts of data at them. If they have enough compute power, they can learn, but they don't reason very well. So the third wave of AI that's coming, we're working on this in our labs as well. I'm sure others are, is adaptive reasoning, more like a human thinks. So able to reason and learn, but not need the kind of data and compute power that AI today have. So those are the big 3 mega trends that I'm interested in. I think going to live in a very different world, but there's not going to be a clear line where we go, oh, now I'm stepping into an AI future. We're just going to use this more and more and more. And so one day we'll look back and go, I don't know how I lived without this.
That's fantastically explained. So you're painting this picture that AI will just become part of the fabric of our society and and change the way that we live. I think that's a good segue to you, Belinda. So you've got a particular interest in AI policy. So what do you think that the next kind of 5 to 10 years for AI is going to look like? In particular, this picture that Liesel's painted as a kind of society where AI is fundamentally embedded. Are there particular policy questions that we need to be thinking about around that?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I think responsible AI moves us from the periphery to becoming at the core of AI development. Ensuring that it's developed and built in a responsible way. There's growing awareness around some of the challenges that AI has. How do we make sure they're used responsible? So I guess that's my area of interest. I think what is interesting that challenges perhaps some of the ways we've thought about policy development and regulation is, to what Liesel was talking about, and that is how AI is developed. So we agree. We think that there's a paradigm shift. At the moment, it's been around supervised learning, where AI models learn from data sets that humans have curated and labelled. That has limitations. What we're seeing now is the developments in unsupervised or self-supervised learning, where systems can process just huge amounts of data. It's less structured. It can be unlabelled. And it learns patterns and relationships between those different pieces of information. So it's much more open-ended, and it closely mirrors the way humans learn about the world. So I think for me, that raises challenges around how we think about policy and how we think about regulation. Lots of discussion in recent years around algorithm transparency and whether someone should monitor the algorithms, and that's just not going to apply in this way AI is going to be developing. So I think that creates some new challenges. But I'm quite optimistic. I think the new applications that are available using this kind of AI in the creative fields, we've seen GPT-3, which can write poetry, it can write your emails for you. I think that's really fascinating. But also in solving societal challenges, climate change, we've seen AI used in COVID, in the pandemic. Microsoft's been looking at antigen mapping project to see how the body reacts to different diseases and to vaccines. So I'm quite optimistic that there are huge breakthroughs coming.
Great, thanks, Belinda. Now, Anton, you've been at the forefront of kind of AI developments for quite a while, as was I actually. I did a PhD in AI that I finished back in 1999, and then I decided to leave AI thinking, oh, this AI thing will never really work. So I always tell people, if you want an idea and a prediction of what the future is going to look like, then probably don't come and ask me because I'll get it wrong. But you stuck with it, Anton. So, where do you see more the technological developments that we're going to get to in AI, and particularly thinking of that history that we've had? We've had those winters where things got overhyped. We've got Belinda now talking about AI systems that can write poetry and things like that. I do still feel like there's quite a lot of hype around what AI can do, when we probably need to be more informed about what it can't do. So what's your views of where we're going in the next 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, John. I would love to take credit for having had better insight than you. Really, I was just standing in the right place when my research area happened to become fashionable. But I think that, as with so many things, we tend to overestimate the short-term impact and underestimate the long-term impact. Technologically, it's, as Belinda says, we're moving out of a process, or the research at least is moving away from supervised learning towards weakly supervised learning. That means that's kind of matched by a shift from discriminative towards generative models. What that really means in terms of capability is systems that can learn from less data and learn to do more interesting, more challenging things from less data. And as Liesel says, there's more focus on systems that interact with humans to to work with them rather than to do something static. This is, I've been working on visual question answering recently, which is a new, entirely new area that we've applied, for instance, to trying to have robots that you can just tell to do something and they'll do it. So the other trend, though, is more of what we've seen in the last 10 years. So along this line whereby things sneak up on us and we miss the big impact, the last 10 years has seen a revolution in the way we gather information. I mean, just the way we watch TV has changed completely. Journalism's changed. So much has changed. And a lot of that change has been driven out of multinationals. One of the things that AI does is to create global markets, and we've welcomed these enormous companies into our lives that operate these global markets. That trend will continue, and it will continue slowly, but the process that those multinationals have run will continue. And that offers all sorts of opportunities and all sorts of challenges for Australia. So there's a big question for us, particularly about whether we're going to be a follower or a leader in this area. We do have amazing AI skills in this country. We've been punching above our weight for more than 30 years. But we face a challenge whereby there is incredible investment, not just out of governments, but out of companies everywhere else in the world, and Australia is lagging on almost every measure, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to my next question, which is to really, if we've got this future where AI is going to be everywhere, the natural next question is, what is Australia's role in all of that? As I said earlier, I think Australia does have very strong capability in certain areas in AI, certainly some of our universities, but Australia is also known for not ranking very well on various innovation metrics. So what's your view, Anton? I mean, do you think that Australia can be a leader in this space, or do you think that, we're resigned to the fact that we're just going to follow behind other countries that have got the big tech companies and the big dollars behind them?
No, I think we're in a really strong position here. Australia's got a lot of what it takes to do this. We're actually in a very good time zone. We've got an amazing quality of life. We've got a fantastic education system. But more than all of that, we've got a wonderful set of liberal democratic institutions that offer value for a brand in Australian AI. We have great research tradition as well. We have all of the pieces that it takes. And we've seen Israel, South Korea, Singapore all take up fantastic positions in this tech by being adventurous, both on a government level, but also at an industry level. Australia does suffer on all of those innovation measures, partly because we've got it too good, frankly. But that is an opportunity. It's not necessarily a problem. We do, as a nation, in my opinion, I'm biased, I suppose, but as a nation, we do tend to focus on tech transfer and, frankly, in that process, on university bashing. When the truth is that the universities are doing very well internationally on the basis of not very much. It's Australian companies that fail to innovate serially, not only in AI, but in absolutely every other area as well. But that's a solvable problem, right? If you can look at the other examples around the world, and it doesn't actually take all that much to solve those problems. So with a bit of commitment, I think we're in a very good position to solve this problem.
So are there particular things that you think we need to do differently as a country? I mean, you're probably well placed to answer this, given that you've got one foot in industry and one foot in university right now. So, is it just a case of continuing to do what we've done and continuing to try and punch above our weight, or what should we change?
The opportunity,
the magic power to change things, what would you do?
The opportunity in AI and this tech is that it creates disruptive businesses in all sorts of areas. So Google weren't running a small search engine before they started a search engine, before they started Google, and Uber weren't running a small transport company before they started Uber, right? These companies started recently and are revolutionary. The opportunity with AI is thus to disrupt the global marketplace. And we can do that from Australia. There are actually companies doing it from Australia. There's some great examples. A lot of what we focus on, we tend to, however, focus, unfortunately, primarily on existing companies. And the existing companies have shown great reluctance to actually innovate on any level. And this is, instead, what Israel did was to really invest in startups, to take some of the people with these amazing world-class skills, we have the skills here, and back them in their attempts to take on the world and build a global market for Australia and for Australian tech. It takes resilience, right? We don't have great skills in this area at the moment, and it will take multiple rounds of failing before we get the skills to do it. So just by doubling down, committing to support for AI-enabled startups, we can take on the world, right? We've got everything it takes. All we need is to double down on the capability to generate the people. It's research that generates these people that take on these things, right? Google came out of Stanford PhD students. It's people with really strong understanding of the tech that generate these new opportunities and generate and can see how the technology can create revolutionary business opportunity. We're really well placed to do it.
Okay.
I don't agree. I think Australia is going to keep slipping. Sorry if I may I'm very passionate about this because I've been capital raising and growing companies in this space for over a decade now. I've always raised far more money in the US than I have here. My last company, I actually had to move to America, and suddenly my business catapulted. I was slugging it out for 8 years in Australia. Just not getting much headway. I moved there within 2 years. We had a big, massive deals and a big IBM acquisition. The Google founders actually dropped out of their PhD to build Google. The big challenges we have here is, I think to grow our AI industry, a lot of our initiatives and focus is on academia and institutional AI, and really as Anton correctly pointed out, it's about startups, but it's not just about saying, let's give some startups, a $300,000 grant or a $1 million grant. That's nothing. In the US, $2 million, $3 million is a pre-seed round before you even know what you're doing. Series A are sitting at about $12 to $15 million when you're just starting to get product market fit. In the US, I want about 3 or 4 years just experimenting and breaking stuff and throwing things out the door before we even had to produce an application. So, it's not just the quantum of the capital here. The capital doesn't really allow you to take risk in Australia. I know we think we have a much more robust venture capital industry than we did a while ago, but you still have to show your blue chip customers and your big blue chip partnerships. And to me, most of those companies are from like the last century. So you spend your time in Australia running around trying to prove yourself as a startup, running around trying to prove that you've got something, that you've got these big customers that are validating it. Whereas in the US, they say, here's $20 million, go reshape a market, go break the old paradigms and build something new. So we're the company I'm running now is primarily funded with US capital, and most of our market, most of our growth is in the US. You need 3 things for innovation. You need talent, you need capital, and you need a market. We don't have a big enough market here. We just don't. We don't have enough capital. The capital we have is not as interested in wildly risky $1 billion plays. We do have talent, and that's extraordinary. I absolutely agree there. You know, the people that come out of our universities here are world class. Often, if you're building something innovative, you're the most interesting game in town, so you get to retain your talent, which is wonderful. But I think we have a very long way to go in a climate where, you know, entrepreneurship is still seen as something you do if you don't get to become a doctor or lawyer. You know, it's like sort of, oh, well, you know, oh, it's okay. My daughter decided to become an entrepreneur instead of, you know, and that's not a cultural thing that we esteem here.
And is it, and this is a question to any of the panelists, I mean, is it a solvable problem, or is all hope lost? I mean, it's always useful to kind of reflect back on history. I mean, have we seen improvements over the last 5 to 10 years? Does that give us any signals that we might get some improvements in the next 5 to 10?
I think that it is a solvable problem. I agree with almost everything that Liesl said. I think we don't have smart money here. Like most of what we've got in Australia is dumb money. I'm afraid somebody warned me more than a decade ago not to take dumb money, and at the time I dismissed the idea, right? I was ready to take any money, and they were right. I took dumb money and it killed me, right? It was a horrible experience. When you talk to a venture capitalist in the US, they tend to be an engineer. They understand the space, they understand the tech, and they're capable of understanding the market that you want to move into, or the opportunity to disrupt that market. When you talk to a venture capitalist in Australia, they're normally an accountant, and they want to talk about addressable market and then your margin per widget. The guys from Google didn't finish their PhDs, but they did start them, right? They got their, they understood that search page ranking is a matrix inversion problem, right? Because they deeply understood what matrix inversion can do. Matrix inversion is obviously a subject close to my heart, and probably something John spent a lot of time doing as well. We do have the talent. I disagree about the market. We have a global market just the same way as everyone else does. Companies come here to try out their tech in Australia because it's a kind of contained market. It's also a good microcosm of the US and to a lesser extent the UK. So I think that we've got a lot of the bits of the puzzle. What we don't have is the kind of risk appetite that Liesl's describing in the US capital market. We don't have those funds that are willing to back people on the basis of a vision and the chance of creating a unicorn. What we have is a bunch of people who want 10% per annum return on their funds at a very low risk. And that's why so many of our graduates, so many of our great people go overseas. When you go overseas, you meet Australians everywhere in the tech sector because they've had a great education, they're really good, and they've been unable to find a job in Australia because we just don't invest in the same way.
Anton, I've been there with dumb money. Thought I could just override it with smartness. Just give me the money, I'll do something with it. And oh my gosh, ball and chain around the ankle for sure. But I had a very direct experience of that when I was raising capital for my previous company, the one that was acquired by IBM. I was sitting in a venture capitalist office in Sydney, and he literally said to me, "I don't care what you think your valuation is. Our fund mandate is we invest $3 million. We want about a third of your company. So you are worth $10 million no matter what." At exactly the same time, I was in diligence with a US fund whose seed round was $10 to $15 million, who also wanted about a third of the company. So by definition, getting on a 12-hour, 15-hour plane flight meant I was tripling the value of my company for exactly the same company, same technology, same uptake, same everything. So yeah, I think it's getting better. We're certainly seeing a lot more Australian VCs understanding that they've got to be competitive on a global market. So things like safe notes, weren't done here at all. 5 or 10 years ago, they're like a convertible note that allows an entrepreneur to grow fast without a lot of legacy clauses in all of their investor deeds. So we're seeing a bit of that. But yeah, as I keep saying, it's still easier at the moment to raise capital for very, very risky, big play things. Like we're playing in what we think is the major productivity challenge of our century. It takes 4 hours a day to run a home. It's about 20% of our GDP. About 1 in 10 people live with severe disability, and that costs someone about 60 hours a week to manage. But even as disability aside, a regular home it's just ridiculous that, you know, my grandmother to me, she got a whole bunch of technology and appliances. I mean, so I have a whole bunch of technology and appliances. It means I can be a working mother. Yet I'm still doing 4 to 6 hours a day, as are many working dads and working parents. So we are trying to solve this problem. It's not been solved, and it's difficult and it's risky. And yeah, there's a lot more audience for that more abstract future play.
Belinda, I just want to bring you into this conversation. I mean, do you think there's a role for the larger tech companies to play here in kind of supporting, you know, what Australia could become in AI over the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, I think it's certainly true that in recent times we've seen more interest from the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Google of the world in doing things in Australia. Is there a role for them to play?
I guess I start with challenging what do we call success, and I guess I get a little bit fatigued that market caps and valuations and number of unicorns is our measure of success. Maybe that's a big company speaking, but what we see is companies, our partners that are doing amazing things out of Australia. I'd point to Willow, who are building digital twins, who are exporting their services all around the world. They're developed here, they've got staff here. We see lots of that. Now, to me, that's successful. They are building new IP, they're delivering amazing services. So I'd love to see the conversation change around that we have this sort of one measure of success, and maybe it's a media preoccupation with tech billionaires and market caps and big numbers. But I think there's so many great stories out there. I think the role of the big companies is underplayed, and you know, we see big tech bashing and the techlash phenomenon. But when you look at Microsoft's been in Australia for 39 years, we employ 2,000 people here. We have 16,000 partner organizations who are building new IP and contributing $20 billion to the economy. So I think that the big companies are undervalued for the role they play in supporting new development and new local companies. I'd love to see us talk more about the tech ecosystem as opposed to just Australian tech companies. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine that we define. I feel like we define success in quite a narrow way, but you know, I'm not in the venture capital world, so I'll take Anton and Liesel's views of that as their experience.
That's actually a good segue, actually. I'm just looking at the comments and questions that are coming in from our audience, and do please, everyone out there, continue to add questions. I will start to pick those up in the next few minutes. But there's a comment in there which essentially says that the challenge is not so much to get the public sector in particular to adopt the next wave of AI tech, but to get them to actually use the current tech, which I think relates to a broader question about business adoption of AI. We've talked a lot about the startup world, but you know, there's lots of other ecosystems out there that we would like to adopt AI if we're going to get to this future that Liesel has painted of AI being everywhere. So do you think we're in a position where kind of businesses or the public sector can adopt AI right now? Are they adopting AI? What are the challenges for them to adopt AI? What do we need to be doing differently to help them to adopt AI? And I'll throw that open to any of the panelists that want to have a go at that one.
Yeah, there's a great opportunity, I think, in having the various governments as a customer. It's something they do quite well in the US. And there, you know, a bunch of states mandate that they need to do a proportion of their acquisition, of their spend from local startups, and that gives companies their desperately needed first contract. There's good opportunities there, and we're doing some, the Australian Institute for Machine Learning is doing some great work with the state government in South Australia in remote pastoral assessment and these kind of things, working on improving both farming and environmental outcomes. There's really good opportunities there. And when you talk to people in the state government, they've got no end of good ideas about how we can help. There is a challenge in the in this kind of fast follower narrative that we're, or even slow follower narrative that is that's getting pushed. So we're just going to be a place that waits for AI to be commoditized, and then once it's commoditized, we'll buy it, right? Which is a bit like saying that we'll just wait for the steam engine to be commoditized and we'll buy it, I suppose. But the difference with this AI tech is that you don't buy the steam engine, right? You buy the wheat. You don't buy the computer, right? Australia missed the ICT revolution despite having building. I think we built the world's 4th modern computer in Australia, and nonetheless managed to miss the ICT revolution. The difference for Australia is, the difference in this instance is that if you wait for it to be commoditized, the market is gone, right? It's not, you don't buy the tech, you buy the product, the produce, right? So we're not buying from Google, we don't buy the machine learning tech, right? We don't buy a search ranking engine, we buy ads, right? So that market is gone. That money goes to California. Right? And as with so many of these things, you don't get to buy the tech. It's not like you get to buy computers from Taiwan, or you get to buy electricity generating equipment from Germany, or solar panels from China. Right? What happens in AI is that the market is then there. Right? They're making the money out of it. So it is this kind of narrative about being a follower and waiting for it to be commoditized will have a very different impact this time around.
I have a couple of thoughts to add there. I think Anton's right about commoditization. That also does bring opportunity, though, for companies who've not dabbled with AI, who are wondering what to do. 10 years ago, if you wanted to, I don't know, get a speech-to-text engine or some, unstructured data analytics using AI, it was very difficult. $500,000 enterprise level deployment. Now it's become very democratized, sort of like, in the 80s or 90s, if you wanted a CRM system, you had to go get a, $100 million, I won't name any companies, Oracle or something, giant installation. Now you can get HubSpot or Salesforce, whatever, for $50 a month. The same thing's happening with AI. You can grab TensorFlow, you can grab, Microsoft has an incredible suite of tools to experiment, and the bar is getting lower and lower for companies to pick up and adopt and experiment with technologies. There are 2 areas where I was bashing Australia's capital earlier, but there are 2 areas where I think we have some really interesting things we could be thinking about more. The one is something one of our early investors actually said to me. He said, in California, you have it's like this forest with these giant redwood trees just crowding out all the light. You have the Republic of Google and the Republic of Amazon, the Republic of Facebook. They own all the data, they own everything, they own the tools, they own the infrastructure, they own the devices that people are interacting with and managing. And in Australia, it's kind of interesting. You can actually grow up a company, and we're a society that's very, very protective of our individual rights and our privacy, but we're also a lot more willing than most to share information for the greater good. And I think government's very progressive here and very interested in looking at, like our universal health records. How well did we do with COVID? Because we have like check-ins and QR codes. I mean, wow, good on us. So, this idea that we actually have a set of data that as a population we believe belongs to us and belongs to the greater good, even though we absolutely insist on and should on us being sovereign, our own data being sovereign to us. So I think there's something in there that we can really play with, where we can give innovative companies playground to actually do great things in AI without having to just be a commodity or an app in somebody else's massive ecosystem. Third area I just want to mention quickly is I'm in love with robotics. I've been my whole life. I can't wait for an army of robots, like, iRobot NS5s, but good ones. I'm so sick of doing dishes and, getting my family up in the morning with coffee and having to make dinner and having to clean the floor and having to clean the windows and having to do all the stuff. And we're actually physically building robots here in Australia. We have all these agricultural robots and mining robots. We're building robots that we're going to be shipping to NASA. And we're building them here in Australia, and we're putting our own epigenetic brain in them. So I think we have niche talent. So we have this kind of global asset of data and a willingness of a population to do sort of population-wide deployments. But we also have very, very niche talent, so we could just hammer a lot more. We might find the next great interface in our lives is not a smartphone. It might be some other technology combination. We may well be able to invent it right here.
Belinda, do you have any thoughts on how we can help businesses to adopt AI? You must have seen a lot of this in your current role.
I actually have a fairly optimistic view of the business take-up. If you saw the ABS characteristics of business data a couple of weeks ago, cloud is the greatest uptake of technology in business, and cloud is, of course, the precursor to AI. I think it was around 57%, and I suspect that's underreported, because if we're relying on self-reporting, I would say there's a whole lot of businesses that they don't know they're using cloud. And I would say equally with AI. So the AI use, self-reporting use dropped off massively. But, John, you said you were studying AI in the I won't quote you. I think you mentioned AI has been around since the 1950s. Sorry, you weren't studying in the 1950s.
I definitely wasn't studying it in the 1950s.
Apologies. But
AI lotion that I use on my skin. It keeps me
lovely.
young.
Yeah. So AI has been around for a long time, and the example I always talk about is Clippy, right? Remember Clippy? Clippy was AI. So AI is infused into, if you're using an accounting software package that sort of makes recommendations to you about tax deductions, you're using AI. If you're using spell check, you're using AI. So I kind of think it is there is uptake. The cloud, it kind of reminds me of the early days of cloud, of how are we going to get businesses to adopt the cloud? And even then, I don't think they knew they were already using the cloud. So I'm optimistic. Now, this may not be creating, this is using AI. But as Liesl said, we have, Microsoft, we think cloud is the great democratizer. It democratizes IT. So if you're using the cloud, you are getting, whether you're a one-person company or a huge government agency, you're getting the innovation, the features, of all the big cloud, hyperscale cloud providers. And we're doing the same with AI. So build your own AI. Here's the tools, you can build it. So I'm a little bit more optimistic about that, and I don't think the business adoption and use is as bad as the picture we paint. And I certainly think COVID accelerated that, and it's now, how do we lock in those gains?
Absolutely, great answer. And we also, I'm aware that we have quite a few public sector professionals in the audience today, and there's a question that's come in around public sector. We've talked a lot about business adoption, and the question, which is, do you think that AI is engaging with the sort of problems that will be useful for the public sector? For example, I've seen a case of using AI to pull information from old PDFs to translate old public service documents into a modern format. So you touched a little bit on this earlier, Anton, but are there particular opportunities or particular things we should be doing to support the public sector in solving problems using AI?
Yeah, absolutely. It's most of the technology is actually already there. It's just a question of applying it towards these goals. But the next generation of tech is getting even better at these kinds of processes. So one of the trends that's happening now is towards personalization. So we all used to go and buy albums. So for those of you that are old enough, So remember when an album was a piece of plastic that you bought as a unit that had 10 to 12 songs on it? And now nobody buys albums anymore. My children think it's hilarious that you would buy songs in some curated order that was inflexible. Now you buy songs in individual songettes and put them together in any way that you want. You don't have to wait for your television channel to put on what you want to see. You watch what you want to see whenever you want to see it. Actually Google Ads is the great example of personalization, where the revenue from ads has gone through the roof with their effectiveness. And that personalization process has huge applications in government, because so much of what government does is about trying to make one big decision that kind of suits everybody and doesn't really suit anybody. Whereas personalization means that you can make decisions that are actually targeted at the individual. So there are a huge range of opportunities to do fantastic good out of ordinary decisions that government make without really needing to spend any more or invest any. So we could direct public housing in the place where it's going to have a better impact. We could make health decisions more personalized. We could, I have no doubt personally that taking homeless people off the street saves money in total. The only problem is that it saves a little bit of money in at least 14 separate places. And if we gave homeless people somewhere, services, and actually paid for them centrally, then that would save money in total. And one of the things that ML can do, or AI can do, is is actually do the full economic model of all of those things, predict what the impact in 10 years' time on somebody's life will be of giving them, taking them off the streets effectively, and join the dots that would enable somebody in government to make the decision they probably want to make already. It's just providing better evidence because it can make personalized predictions. So the opportunities are enormous. One of the challenges is this great fear. Whenever you talk to public servants, they're very enthusiastic about the opportunity and absolutely petrified that they're going to wind up on the front page of tomorrow's paper. I personally think that we should underwrite that risk. If you're a public servant and you wind up on the front page of tomorrow's paper, we could just guarantee that as long as you haven't done anything that's underhand, then that will have no impact on your career. And you won't get a please explain from the minister just because somebody's written a story about you that misrepresents what happened. Just that single action, I think, would unlock a lot of the goodwill, a lot of the fantastic initiatives that people inside the public service are already trying to drive.
Thanks, and that relates to sorry, Lisa.
John, I have to say something about policy and government and population. I think there's a very dark side to this. It's the elephant in the room that I think policymakers and people miss a lot. And that is this: when you think about a highly personalized AI that's able to observe most of the movements you make in your daily life, most of your communications, able to predict and anticipate what you're going to need, and then give you a human-like front end that says, hey, I'm here for you, I love you, I'll do whatever you want, I'll make your app work in a certain way, I'll talk to you. We have an already shifting population behavior at scale. Whenever we would go into a new sector in my last company, we would have a couple of big organizations, depending on what was happening economically. So banks might say, hey, we want more credit card debt, or we want more credit card signups and more personal loans and more mortgage debt. And we would double it against a baseline with a good, high quality, predictive, personalized AI. The same thing happened across purchasing decisions. You can double the amount of junk people buy and bring into their lives, burning fossil fuels. And, so one really hit home for me. I was living in San Francisco, and I was had a couple of different home hubs, all AI-powered prediction engines on the back and very human-like front ends. And I remember opening my door one day, and I had 6 boxes stacked like a pyramid. I had Post-it notes inside bubble wrap, inside a box, because I didn't have to think about it. I just said, oh, Home Hub, give me Post-it notes. My son at the time, I was trying to teach him to be a good young man, to cook and clean up after him and budget. And he had the job of making us dinner one night a week. He figured out he could just stand over our home AI and say, give me pizza. And the pizza would arrive. So what's happening is that the AI that's being built and put in our lives is driving towards an optimization outcome. And that outcome is get someone addicted to a platform or get them to buy a bunch of stuff. We were building companion characters for media companies that people were spending 20 to 40 hours a week talking to an AI and not leaving their homes, not going for a walk, not going to work, not meeting their friends. It was awful. I used to pull back from those projects and try and donate the technology to good projects just to kind of counterbalance it. And company I'm running now is actually a public benefit corporation for this reason. But what I'm saying is we are going to have a population where we are, to me, what's happened in the US in the last few years is a result of giant technical systems mediating and filtering and deciding what we're seeing and shifting population behavior and population belief systems at scale. So back to this pizza example, the shareholders of the particular company that delivered that won a fraction of a cent. But we broke our household budget for meals. We broke our family value system, which is, boys have to learn to cook and clean. We ate 1,000 calories and there was an environmental impact to that. None of that was thought about, because our whole capitalistic system is around, shareholder value, transaction events, eyeballs. And we don't actually have an alternate system to actually fund innovation, except grants, which are very early stage. So that, to me, is the big elephant in our room. Again, I think 5 or 10 years from now, you will be on default mode. Your dinner that you eat, people are, I'm on a board of a bank and people spend more than half of their disposable income in certain demographics on takeaway and Uber and just stuff that just gets suggested to them and is driven by AI. So I think there's a significant shift coming in population behavior. When we have an army of submissive female AI doing our bidding, we've watched population behavior change. We'd have AI that you could say to it, hey, you stupid cow, and it would say, I'm sorry, sir. And most of them do that now. You wouldn't do that to a human. And that behavior became entrenched and people transfer that to human operators. So really at a policy level, I really think, just like we've got triple bottom line reporting around environmental and social impact, we really need to think about optimization. What are we optimizing the population that we serve, whether it's our clients or our population? Are the AI technologies we're using? We can't stop AI. But what are they working for? Are they working for that fraction of a transaction event in California, or are they working for a family or an individual's life becoming a little bit better day by day? If we don't get this right, the cost is going to be massive health blowout, environmental costs, and all sorts of other social costs that we are not transferring onto the people who are making the profit out of it. It's a little bit abstract, but it's where we're going.
Absolutely. We've got actually a question on this topic in the chat, and that's what sort of new regulations do you expect will come alongside the next wave of AI? I mean, we've seen some movement in recent months on this with the proposed EU regulations to regulate AI, and also in Australia, the Human Rights Commission are bringing out this report on human rights and AI. Belinda, this is your area of expertise. Do you have any predictions for, where regulations are going to change that could help here?
Yeah, so we kind of view that, a whole new area of law came around with privacy. We have privacy law experts, we have privacy law. I think we see that with AI, that there will be new regulation, new experts. Perhaps there becomes something like in the medical world of a Hippocratic oath for developers of some kind of responsible requirements. I think there are use cases of AI. So, in talking to the government, you probably don't need to regulate Clippy. He's probably okay. But when you're talking about things like facial recognition technology and anything that goes to, biometrics and surveillance, then we probably do need some sort of guardrail regulation around how that is used. So I think it's hugely challenging. I think it'll be interesting to see where the EU developments go. But yeah, I can't see a world where this is not regulated. I think how is the challenge.
John, I think that there are. Well, I must admit, I'm intrigued in the extent to which, particularly in Australia, we seem to focus on ethics rather than AI. Right? We seem to be determined to get the ethics process right before we've got any AI. I have repeatedly referred to the process about the adoption of cars in the southern states of the US, where you had to have a person walking out the front with a red flag waving it, warning everybody that a car was coming. And actually one of the laws said you had to be ready to disassemble your car and put it in a ditch and cover it with a blanket if a horse came in the other direction. I think that's, we're kind of at the same position at the moment. A whole lot of very well-intentioned but impractical efforts towards trying to ameliorate the challenges of this very powerful technology. We do need to do something, but as with so much else, this is a global problem, and what we decide, we've just had a crack at trying to resolve something with Google and their ads revenue, and I think it pretty much highlighted that we don't have a vote. At the moment, we have such little standing globally that our position is irrelevant. And if we're not a participant in this space, then it will always be us. The reason that we started developing satellite tech here in Australia was really because we wanted to get into the Security Council of the UN so that we'd have a vote, right? We needed to be good at something so that our vote would count. The same applies here. We need to be good at this if our vote is going to count for anything. Otherwise, we'll have a gold-plated ethics system and absolutely no ethical outcome. That said, the primary ethical challenge we face isn't about how we apply the AI we have at the moment. The primary ethical problem we have, as far as I'm concerned, is who's missing out. AI is largely in the hands of a bunch of companies and very well-educated middle-class people, and there's a whole lot of, there's an infinite range of other places that you could apply this tech to do a great world of good, and it's not happening. I'm personally trying to start a foundation to fund the application of AI in some of these areas. We've been working in trying to prevent human trafficking, and there's nobody else is going to invest in preventing human trafficking, and it's a problem that's ripe for the application of AI. And there's 1,000 other ones that just aren't getting done and really have no prospect of getting done. There's a much, much bigger ethical issue than whether we use face recognition in quite the correct way in Australia. Horrible things are happening, and AI is not even touching the sides unless there's a whole lot of money associated with it.
Absolutely. We're getting towards the end of our time. We've just got a couple of minutes left. I might round up by asking one final question to each panelist, and maybe this is a bit unfair because I haven't prompted you with this question, but we've only got 2 minutes left, so 30-second answer each, please. But this panel was all about, what we can expect from AI in 5 to 10 years. Let's do a thought experiment and imagine that we reconvene this panel 10 years from now with the same set of participants. What's the main topic that you think should be discussed at that panel 10 years from now? Belinda, what do you think?
That's interesting. I think whatever comes next after AI, I think this will move so quickly, we'll be beyond that. Maybe it's whatever comes after quantum. 10 years is a long time in the tech industry.
Good answer. Liesl?
AI would be running more than half of my life. I'm going to have a drone that goes and get me a coffee before I even know I need one. I'm going to, just have everything I do in my daily life on background autopilot. Who do I belong to?
And
Who do I
Anton.
belong to? Who does my eyeball and my dollar and my time? My time is the only finite thing. Who does that belong to?
Thank you. And Anton?
I expect that, well, I really hope that what we'll be saying is that we've solved all of these first world problems. How are we going to go and start to solve some third world ones?
Great. Well, look, we've reached the end of our time, so it remains for me just to say a big, huge thank you to our panelists today, Liesl Yearsley, Belinda Dennett, and Anton van den Hengel. I thought it was a great discussion, and also a big thank you to all of our audience today and for being so active, putting in questions, which I tried to get to as many of them as I could. There is a slight break now before we will all reconvene at 4 o'clock for the main Techtonic stream. So I'll see you all back there. But if we don't see you all before, I look forward to seeing you in 10 years at our reconvened panel where we will be discussing the next wave of something other than AI. But thank you very much and see you all later.
Thank you.